This video, I wanted to explore the API for a bit and just kind of figure out issues that we may not be handling or different cases that we're not handling when decoding our JSON. Um, so the first thing I wanted to try, and I've kind of gone through here and experimented a little bit so we don't have to type everything out on screen. The first one is I wanted to figure out what the first date was that was valid. It looks like it was June 16th, 1995. Um, so if we make a query prior to that, we'll actually get a 400 and then a little bit of a message payload. It might be nice to use this message payload to present some kind of information, even if it wasn't in our UI. Could be we use that when in order to throw and perhaps log an error, so we can figure out what's going on our side. A typical query. This is the first day. We get back this JSON payload that we've already seen. This one is a GIF, which that will render properly if we pass this URL. But here's an example of one that won't. Notice the URL is a YouTube link and it's set to autoplay. That async image won't render anything there. It will, however, if we pass this thumbs true parameter, it will pass us a thumbnail URL. So we'll want to do something with that where we can perhaps flip these around, or we'll have to figure out how we want to handle that. Our model will have to change. The other thing that isn't here is the HD URL. Definitely makes me wish that these were named a little differently, maybe like always a thumbnail and then the main, but that's not the case. There's also kind of an interesting feature here where we can send a number in, an integer on count, and that will get us back a random set of images. We can also get date ranges. And you want to go forward to back, I think. Let's see if that's correct. Okay, so we want to go forward in time from start to end date. If we just had that open-ended, it might take a really long time, the query, so we probably don't want to do that. And that's probably, that's the one we'll be using ultimately, is this one. Most likely we'll want to fetch like some number of them at a time, maybe like 10 at a time when the user scrolls down in that list, and then we can cache that JSON data in our local database, and things should get snappier, and then we won't have to hit the API continually because we'll be caching that in the long term. Yeah, I think that might just be a duplicate, just a longer data set. You can see that's like an entire month. It took quite a while for that to come back. And you can see it's instead of just a single item, we get an array of them. And that should be pretty simple to handle in our code. And here's how I determine when that started. It may well be in the documentation. This is the easiest way to do it. There were some odd kind of like sharp edges I found. Like here, I noticed on their GitHub issues page, sometimes an explanation doesn't come back, but it's not a huge problem for us because it doesn't come back as nil. So we'll just kind of put a pin in that. And it's something we probably want to address at some point, but not a big deal. Here's an example of a payload with no copyright. And that, a lot of them do, and if it doesn't, it just means there's no extra copyright information, so it must be NASA's copyright. But we're already handling that pretty well at this point. And then there are many, many ways to structure the query incorrectly. Here, I've flipped the dates from the, so they're backwards. Instead of 7 to 8, it goes 8 to 7, and then that gets us a 400 with an error message. There are strange kind of gaps in the data set. Let's see if we can, I think that, yeah, that's actually the second day. So the 16th, there's data. The 17th, there's no data. Once again, the same thing for the 19th. Let's check it one more. Okay, and finally we get some data. I'm going to change that back to 17. And then, of course, we've seen this one already. If we don't have an API key, or if it's invalid, we'll get back an error message on that as well. We actually get back a 403 there. Let's rename that to 403. And this one as well. And this, I think what I'll do is I'll save this file to our, not the project itself, but to the project folder. I'll push it up to GitHub, and it'll make a nice reference where we can look back and see what problems can occur with our API and how we want to address those going forward. So it looks like our main issues are, we want to make sure that if and when we have a date picker or we're getting a bunch of different pods, we don't want to go further back than June 17th of 1995. We want to make sure our date queries are in the right order. Probably the most critical thing right now, there are several fields that are optional. HD URL doesn't always come back with a value. Copyright and thumbnail URL. So we'll want to come up with a strategy for handling that and not crashing or not rendering the data or decoding it. We should be able to handle those with ease. And we'll do that pretty soon here, I think, in the next few videos. And then if it's a video, we probably want to get that thumbnail image, and then we want to show that. So we'll have to do a little swapping around and maybe a little tinkering around with our model in order to achieve that goal. And then there was this, there's this concepts field that says that it's been turned off. So for now, I think we'll just ignore that. We'll just keep it out of our coding keys, and that should be just fine. And then, so far as I can tell, looking at the docs and the API, that media type is always going to be an image or a video. We may do something with that, make an enum, but I don't think it'll be strictly necessary. So like I was saying, what I'll do is I'll save this file, I'll add it to the project folder, the root directory, and then I'll push that so that you'll be able to, come play around with these things yourself. We can also see that just real quickly, what's nice with pause, you get lots of different outputs you can generate. You can also import a lot of things. So if you want, you could scrub back through. I may or may not add these curl commands. For those of you who don't have PAW, it's a pretty nice way to document how to access the API. So I may well do that, or it may just end up as a separate blog post somewhere. So until next time.